right? So let's talk about the basics of CSS. So first of all, the only thing I got on my sexy website is a hello CSS title, right? But it has a class name box. So that means I can refer to it, I can change the styles of my box by going to my CSS and typing .box. The dot means I want to change a class. And then what? Well, I can do many different visual stuff, right? So for instance, how do I change the text color? Anyone? Color, correct. Color red. Yeah, and then it works. And how do we change the background? Background color. Say it again. Or yes, background, correct. Yeah, any of them? Agree? Yellow. And then it works. And how do I add a border? Border, and then we set up, generally speaking, 3 properties. The thickness of the border, 5 pixels. The style of the border could be solid, could be dotted, could be dashed, depends, yeah? So for instance, dashed. And then the color, blue. I'll show you. So if you select the box, you can quickly play with different options. Dotted, solid, yeah, or whatever you want. There are multiple, yeah? And if you want to find them all, if you type border style, hopefully, here you go, Chrome will show you all the different properties. We don't have many, to be honest. Double, for instance, very 90s, you remember? Tables. Yeah, pretty much it. Yeah.
So like syntax is just English. Just
Yeah, yeah, correct. So that's about the border. But now, what if we want to add some gap in between of the text and the border? Padding, that's correct. Padding 30 pixels. So padding, as you can see now, is adding a lot of space surrounding the text and the border. And what if I want to add some space outside of the box? Margin, that's correct, Amy. So margin 20 pixels. So padding runs inside of the box, and margin, as you can see, runs outside of the box. Does it make sense? Any question, Fish? Any question, anybody else? No?
Where can I learn the structure, like the setup of CSS when I start a document? When I start working, like in HTML, you have some code that you have to type, like a structure.
Yeah. No, there is no structure.
CSS
No, yeah. You can run an app without any CSS at all. CSS is optional.
I think again it's referring a bit to the maybe to the box model that we can see in the spec mode.
What, sorry?
The box model, maybe?
No, I'm going to talk about the box model in a minute. So, if that's what you got, now we can talk about the box model. So the box model is the combination of padding, border, and margin. Thankfully today, with Google Chrome, we can visualize the box model easily. Look, you will find a computed tab here, and when you click on it, when you click on the computed link, look at how brilliant this is. So Google is showing, is presenting the box model. You see? And here you can see the margin, 20 pixels. You see, look at on the left-hand side. It's highlighting in brown color where the margin is. And also you can see the border, 5 pixels. And also you can see the padding, 30 pixels on each side. And also you can see the content itself. That's the box model. Yeah? Padding, border, and margin. And what happens if I want to change, for instance, the padding at the bottom? I want to reduce that space here. Can we change the padding in one side? How we do that, Anita?
Padding bottom.
Correct. So padding, that will be the general padding. But also, you can do padding bottom. That will only change the padding at the bottom, as you can see. Yeah. Look at the box model. Look at the padding. 30, 30, 10, 30. Yeah.
You're doing all this in your browser.
Say again?
Are you doing all this in your browser or in Visual Studio?
Visual Studio.
Okay, so it will show you like, if you're second row, it will show you that.
Yep, yep, yep. So you do that on Visual Studio, and then you go back to the browser and you check the result. Yeah. So
Code below overrides the code above, right?
that's a good question. Yes, and we will run a workshop about specificity, where we will explain how do we orchestrate the priorities when applying CSS. It's a different discussion. What, guys, if let me show you something. Can anybody tell me if I type that, what the hell I'm doing now? Right bottom left?
Top
Is
right.
it clockwise or it's clockwise?
It's clockwise face. So these are the different padding styles: top, right, bottom, left, clockwise. Yeah? And once again, back to the browser, and here you go. Top, right, bottom, left. Can I do the same thing with the margin? Can I do that? Yeah, of course I can. Yeah. You see? Top, right, bottom, left. Does it make sense? And what happens if I want a second box? So, do I need to do something like that? Look, box 1 and box 2. So then I do box 1 and then I copy it and then I paste it with box 2. I mean, will that work?
Yeah.
I mean, that, of course it works. Technically speaking, that's okay. But do you think that's the most efficient way of dealing with CSS? No. The entire point about CSS is that classes can be reused. So if you got two boxes with the same styles, then, hey, keep it simple, right? Let's call it box 2 times. So now, it's the same result. It works, but your CSS is simpler. Once again, CSS gets always a bit complicated. So the simpler it remains, the better. But what happens if, fine, both boxes should be the same, but because of whatever reason, I want to change the background color only on the second one? Well, let me show you what I will do. I will change, sorry, in that particular case, I will add a second class. Don't forget you can add multiple classes to each element, like box 2, as an example, yeah? And then on the box 2, I will change whatever it changes. Background color, grid. But only that property. I don't have to redefine everything. There you go. So, if I now change the border to salmon, will both boxes apply the changes? No?
Yes.
Yes? No? Why?
Yes, because the second one is
Say it again, please.
So preset the boxes.
I've changed the border.
Yeah. So we change both boxes.
Is the box 2 redefining the border?
Yeah. No, I mean, no, there will be changes in both boxes.
Only the box 2 will have green color.
So Kaini said something extremely controversial. So she is suggesting that the box 2 will have a green border.
Green, border.
Why a green border, Kaini?
Because it reads up to bottom, top to bottom.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
The
The last what?
part, yeah.
Okay, top to bottom, fantastic. Here we said border 5 pixels dash solid, salmon. But then, is the box 2 redefining the border? No, we are changing the background color. So the background color on the second box will be green, but the border, because it's not redefined here, will be salmon.
Oh, yeah.
You see? Still salmon. But what happened if I do will the box 2 border be purple or salmon? Purple, because we're redefining it. You see? And what if we get rid of that again? Will the border on box 2 be salmon, white, black, transparent, yellow? Salmon, correct? Yeah. And that's pretty much it, the way it works. How do we change, for instance, the size of the text on box 2 using CSS? Font size, correct, Anita. Font size. Then you give a number. Yeah? Like 60 pixels. Oh, that's very big, right? But it works. Let me reduce it a bit to 30 pixels.
So pixels is for font size, margin,
Yeah.
border, everything.
In CSS there are different units. So the classic one is the pixel. Yeah, that's probably the easiest one to understand because 30 pixels is 30 pixels. 100 pixels is 100 pixels, regardless of the context. It's always the same. But then with CSS, you can mess around with, for instance, percent. So you can do things like margin 10%. So what margin 10% means? Look. So margin 10% means, can you see that this space is shrinking as soon as I shrink the browser? So that means 10% of the available width. So the bigger the screen is, the bigger this white space will be. Yeah, that's a bit complicated sometimes. That's a bit complicated. Now with CSS, you can introduce different type of units that we are not going to cover now, but just FYI. You got things like REM, in case you come across that. And also a very new one called VW and VH. Can anybody tell me what VW stands for? Volkswagen?
You were with it?
Viewport. And what the W means? With. That's correct, guys. So that means that the margin will be 10% of the viewport, horizontally speaking. And likewise, what VH stands for? Height. So that will be 10%, the margin will be 10% of the height. That means now the margin will remain stable because I'm not changing the height. Once again, that's a bit more complicated, so don't worry about VH and VW. Just in case you come across that, you know what that means. For now, to me, the important thing to understand is the pixel, because the pixel is just static, easy. Yeah? Any other CSS property that you find particularly interesting? Display, fantastic, I like that, Anita. So, how do we hide the second box? How do we hide it? There are different ways. different ways to hide it. First of all, display none. With display none, the box is hidden. Some of you may be thinking, why do you want a box that is hidden? Well, imagine that you have a button, so whenever you click on the button, you display the box. You know, there is always a reason for that. Let me show you something. Imagine that we got another box. So we got 3 boxes in total. Box, hello CSS, and again. Or again. Yep, we got 3 boxes. The first and the last, they get displayed, yeah? But the second one is hidden because display none. But what happened? Let me show you another property. Sometimes people get confused between display none and visibility hidden. Does anyone know the difference between one and the other? Sorry.
Visibility is still there, but you can't see it. But display is just gone.
Maybe it adds to the DOM.
It removes from the website.
Yeah, so Kaini got it. Look, with display none, the element, sorry, I need to refresh. Hello, here you go. With display none, the element is literally, visually speaking, is not there, it doesn't exist. It doesn't occupy any space on the screen, right? It's not there. With this visibility hidden, however, look, the element is invisible, but still there, as Kaini said. This is like God, if you're a Catholic person. Or that was a bad joke. Yeah, so the element is still there. So if the element changes size, your application will reflect that change. Yeah? So that's visibility hidden. There is a similar one to visibility hidden called opacity. Yeah? Opacity 0 means
It's there, but you can't see it.
display, sorry, I didn't want to put that, yeah, sorry, not display now. You see, opacity 0. You see, the element is here, but it's completely transparent.
So you have to comment out its display and visibility.
Well, of course, because if I put display none, it doesn't matter. If I change colors, it doesn't matter, right? The element is completely destroyed. So it's either one or the other. If you combine them, you know, that doesn't really make sense. So opacity 0 means the element is there, but it's invisible, it's transparent. What's the opposite of opacity 0? 1. Correct. Opacity 1.
So is it like 0.3%?
Yeah. Correct. So now we can go to something in between. 0.5. You see? So you can play with layers. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's briefly talk about positioning. So, what happened if, that feels a bit weird, let me get rid of that. So I want the green box not to be like a sandwich in between of these two, of the other two. I want it to be like floating around the screen. You know, when you visit a website, you always get a dialog, a pop-up saying, do you accept the cookies? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. This sort of annoying messages that you got thanks to the EU. So, yeah. How do we make things floating around the screen? So again, position. I like that, Kenny. Position, if you change it to absolute, look at the change now. Ooh. Suddenly, the green box doesn't play along the others. It plays on a different dimension. Yeah? It comes to the front. And now, how can I move that box, for instance, to the top? You can add a top position, pixels. For instance, the pixels. And likewise, I can move it to the left. and it gets displayed somewhere in between. Once again, remember that with Google Chrome, you can play, look, you see, you can easily move stuff around for testing purposes.
You're just using my arrow keys.
Yes, I'm using my arrow keys, correct. I mean, I can manually put 10 and then put 9, but
Yeah.
with your arrow keys up and down, it's very good, right?
Yeah, I was wondering if it's like quick.
Yeah. So, how, imagine that we in reality want to show a banner at the bottom, like, do you accept cookies? Can we say, do you accept biscuits? Does it make sense here? So, do you accept the biscuits? Yes. How do we display, how can we display that message, for instance, at the very bottom? Of course, we can mess around. So can I, for instance, can I do that? Like if I was like parking my car, like slowly.
So when they mention position absolute
Yep.
and mention the top and left pixels, is it with related to the browser window or?
Yeah, correct. By default, it's related to the browser window. Correct. Do you think if you had to review this code? Actually, let me finish that. Let me align it to the left. How can we make the box fit all the available space on the screen? So can we, for instance, do look at what I'm doing. You got my point, right? I'm trying to align the green box to the bottom, more or less. Look at the code on the right-hand side. That's job interview question. What do you think about that code?
Unprofessional.
Say it again?
Unprofessional.
Why unprofessional, Chuck?
You've basically done it the other way around. You're meant to use different properties, the opposite properties. So you don't have to increase the pixels so much. Rather, you're working your way from bottom to top instead of top to bottom. If that makes sense.
So what will you change?
I will change the top property to bottom.
All right, that's a good point. Yeah. So, Pat, I agree with Chuck. I mean, that's a bit dirty, right? 179 pixels. But on top of the dirtiness of the approach, that's invalid directly. Why? Because that looks perfect on that screen at that resolution, blah, 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 blah. But if our users have a different laptop, it's completely broken. Yeah? You see the difference? 179 pixels from top works if that's my screen size. But if I have a larger screen, it doesn't work anymore. You see, it's still 179. And then you just say, all right, no problem at all. I'll change it again. But then we're breaking it on the other way around. As soon as our users have a smaller screen, oh, where is it? It's gone. So that's not the way you do that. That's not the way you do that.
So it's not compatible on different devices.
That's correct. It's not compatible with different devices. So how can we improve that? Well, first of all, as Chuck suggested, there is an alternative to top, which is bottom, unsurprisingly. So if the only thing you want to do is to drop that box to the bottom of the screen, bottom, 0. Yeah? So with bottom 0, it doesn't matter how big your screen is. It's always at the bottom. And what happened with the width? Still broken. How do we fix the width? 100%. I like that. 100%. So now, look. It doesn't really matter how big the screen is. It will always fit the available width.
Why does that like margin come at the bottom? So when you zoomed in,
Why there's a margin from the bottom? Because probably we added some margin before, right? if I check, do you remember we added some margin? Yeah, you see? I mean, it's hard to see on that screen. Let me bring it back. Yeah, if I hover the box, can you see a salmon line at the bottom? So that's because we added, you see, we added 10 pixels margin. But if we get rid of the margin, let me find it again, here you go, then it's perfectly, I mean, once again, it's hard to see on that screen because it's cutting the bottom of the screen, but you can trust me if I tell you that now it's perfectly aligned to the bottom. So that solution to me will look much better because, you know, regardless of the resolution, it goes from the beginning to the end. So that's about position absolute. Be careful, guys. Many developers overuse that property. I know it's very tempting, right? Because with position absolute, it's very easy to lay out, to move things up and down. But that feels a bit dirty. So to me, position absolute only makes sense if you really want to display a pop-up, something on top of everything else. Probably you've seen on the Codery platform, we got pop-ups showing often, right? So for instance, you see, when you check the updates, that has a position absolute because it's in front of everything else. Yeah, that's a good usage, but don't use it too much. Any other CSS property you want to talk about? Float. No, I'm not going to talk about float because float is the old version of doing layout. So don't use float anymore. Never.
Old version of what?
Say it again?
Old version of what?
Of layouting.
Oh,
So never use float again.
okay.
Any other CSS property?
Maybe position relative.
Position relative? Well, no, I'm not going to go that far, right? I mean, we're going to spend 1 million hours talking about CSS, right? I just want to focus on the basics. Obviously, I didn't mention that, but you can change the style, bold text, right? So you can do font, weight, for instance, bold, yeah? So, well, now it's a bit hard to see, but I hope you agree with me, that font is bolder than that font, yeah? Also, you can display the text in italic, yeah? That was font style, I think. Here you go, yeah? So you can definitely play with different text styling. You can also underline the text. To underline the text, you can use text decoration. Underline. You know, I mean, there are plenty CSS properties to style your content a bit. Yeah? Anything else?
Maybe choosing the elements, the parents, like pop-up menu.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's do that, and then let's leave it here. So let me simplify my stuff a bit. Imagine that we have a single box. Yeah. Yeah, one box. So imagine that I want to change the color when I put my mouse on top of it. Yeah? So when I put my mouse on top of it, the background color should be green, for instance. So you can add a pseudo selector and look at how it looks like. We refer to the box again, and now colon hover. Hover means the cursor is on top of the box. And now you can do whatever you want. Background color green. Yeah? Hover. Very important. So now look at what happened when I when I hover the box. When talking about buttons, and I'm going to do that now, you can deal with other styles like clicked and others. Active. Yeah? You know, when you visit, that happens when you go to Google and you, here you go. Can you see that link? I'm not sure if you can see that. Has a different color than that link. Not sure if you can see that, but it's a slightly different color. Why? Because in HTML, in CSS, you can set a style for the visited links. Yeah? So once again, there are different pseudo selectors, but hover to me, I don't know, it's one of the most important ones. Yeah? Anything else? Say it again? No, we're not going to do media queries now. So you'll find out media queries on task number 4 of CodeFlix. So I want you to figure out how to deal. A media query is a mechanism to change the styles for different resolutions. You've seen that many times, right? If you go to any website like Codery, so the training looks like that. But if I go mobile, if I open DevTools, you see if you click here, you can open a mobile emulator. You see, it's the same website, but the user experience is different. That's because in CSS, you can change the styles depending on the size of the screen, let's say. Yeah? But you'll find out on task number 4, so I don't want to spoil it too much. All right, guys, so I hope that was a decent introduction. Yeah, let's leave it here.